Okay, I'd like to call to order the regular City Council meeting of the City of East Lansing of Tuesday, March 18th, 2025. Could we have the roll call, please?
Councilmember Altman.
Here.
Councilmember Meadows.
Here.
Councilmember Watson.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Singh.
Here.
Mayor Brookover.
Here. Item 1.2, approval of the agenda. Do we have a motion? Moved by Altman, seconded by Watson. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion passes unanimously. Item 1.3, approval of the minutes of regular council of March 4th, 2025, City Council special regular meeting of March 4th, 2025, and City Council discussion only meeting of March 11th, 2025. Do we have a motion or any alterations?
I'll move approval of all three sets of minutes.
Moved by Altman, seconded by
Second.
Meadows. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, motion passes unanimously. Excuse me. Section 2, communications. All written communications received by the council are posted on the online agenda packet. Item 2.2, communications from the audience, in person and online. I have no slips. Anybody here want to talk? Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Gary Mesher. I live at 508 Wayland Avenue here in town. I'm interested in better understanding from council tonight or future meetings what its philosophy is regarding traffic enforcement in general and speeding on our streets in particular, with the attendant noise that often accompanies such speeding. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, sir.
Good evening, Micah Siegel, 6234 Pine Hollow Drive, East Lansing. I'm here on behalf, in regards to agenda topic 5.4, a special use application for 213 Ann Street. Since we appeared last before council in connection with a special use application, we've been working with the city and the planning department to address some of the concerns that were raised during the regular council meeting before the last. And we're set to be, or our application is set to be considered by council again tonight. What we are hoping to do is ask council to table that until the April 22nd next regular council meeting. We're still addressing some issues that were raised by planning, and we'd appreciate the additional time to put together an application that addresses planning department's concerns as well as council's. Thank you.
Okay, counsel, just so I can be clear for the record.
Sure.
You're not hoping to ask us to table, you're actually right now asking us to table on behalf of your client, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you for the record.
Yes, thank you.
Anybody else in the audience? Anybody online?
Yes, there's one caller on the.
Please.
There's somebody right here.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, go ahead, sir.
I'm Joseph Hill. I'm from Brighton. I filed a police complaint not too long ago for an incident that happened at the Jolly Pumpkin, where I was standing on the sidewalk videotaping. And they came and they tried to trespass me. And it escalated, and they turned it into some sort of harassing thing, even though the 911 call, the dispatch, and nothing gave them any clue of harassment once they arrived there. And those are one of those three merits has to be made for them to conclude something. You don't just walk up and say, "Hey, I think you're harassing these people." Somebody has to actually be harassed. I was exercising my First Amendment right. They detained me, they ID'd me, and then the officer that didn't know a sidewalk from public property from private property exonerated. The officer who solicited an illegal trespass and forced my ID under arrest, because in East Lansing, it is illegal to not ID, even though it's not in the state of Michigan. So if I would have held my ID back, even though I didn't have to, because I wasn't trespassing, I'd never been on their property, I was just some guy on a sidewalk with a camera. The sergeant that escalated it into harassment, even though everything that was ever said about me was that I was standing there with a camera, videotaping customers. They felt harassed. They chose to put menus in front of their... everything was they. It was never me. I can't control feelings. Where their feelings start, my rights don't end. I have a right to videotape in public. Your police chief says, the behavior that I demonstrated that day gave them a right. But she says nothing in here other than I was videotaping in public. Then, that's one thing. Now, you guys made a thing with Police Oversight Committee to try to keep things like this in check, where the police can't govern themselves. They ignored it. They said they chose to follow police policy over city council policy. They did not turn over the documents. They made all their decisions before even talking to them, getting recommendations, finding out what went wrong. Investigated ourselves, we found nothing wrong. Case closed. I'm disappointed.
Thank you for your input. Somebody in the queue?
Caller with the iPhone 15, you're allowed to address council. You're muted. They dropped off.
Okay. We'll move on to communications from the mayor and council members. I'll start at my far left here. Dr. Altman.
Thank you, Mayor. I would actually also be interested in an update on where we're headed with traffic enforcement, speeding in general, and also loud cars. I think it would be good to get an update, maybe at a discussion-only meeting at the city manager's discretion. The weather is warming up, and it's starting to become a problem again. We got an email in the past week about this issue. It's in our communications this week, so I think it's an issue that I'd like to keep talking about at the council level when we have an opportunity.
Okay. Mr. Meadows.
Just briefly, I'd just like to extend congratulations to the MSU basketball team for a great season and hopefully a continuing great season, but more so to the East Lansing boys basketball team for their state championship. I think the first in, I think it was 67 years. So it's a great season for them, and it means that East Lansing is the city of champions. So,
Okay. Ms. Watson.
To the person that talked about sending a complaint to LEPOC and that they ignored it, I'll just be asking more questions to find out more so I can understand the routes. Like I saw the video. I haven't followed everything all the way through to today, but I'll do some follow-up, and we want people to be treated correctly who come to town, especially if you're not the problem. So I hope to follow up with you on that.
No. Public comments over now. Go ahead, Ms. Watson.
But we're reachable. Okay, thank you. Thank you. And next, I've been hoping to discuss two things during a discussion-only meeting. One is the public's access to public meetings, whether it's during, which can be more costly, or afterwards. A lot of other entities have access for those who can't make it here publicly or miss a meeting and still want to review it, and I think that our community deserves that. So I hope that can be a discussion item soon, along with the noise in general. well. I met with some constituents this weekend. The weather is getting warmer. Thank you, Gary, for your comments. And they showed me footage of all the noise that was around and talked about their apprehension with contacting the police as well. These are Bailey neighborhood people. Those were, to be specific. And I was woken up by I don't know what was going on, something loud outside in the environment. And so just so everybody can have peaceful experiences, whether they just need peace and quiet or trying to sleep, and how we can live alongside one another would be two great discussion items. And the final two things I wanted to mention is it rained again some more, and I saw some flooding, and I hope that the city, I know City Manager Bellman mentioned the dialogue, but I hope if that's, especially if that's sent out to everybody in the community, that we can uplift how people can take care of themselves better with stormwater. For example, I've asked about rain barrels before. I was reading something today about French drains, and so I'm just curious in everything that we can offer to the community, especially because it's very costly to fix what the problems are, and we've got a revenue to no revenue problem in East Lansing. And the final thing I wanted to uplift is this beautiful resolution celebrating Women's History Month, not just because I'm a woman, but one of the reasons why I uplift the resolutions that come on to the City of East Lansing Council's agenda is because it speaks to our values. It's not just writing, it's something that can be uplifted, and it's something for if our council members also want to talk to the community about what we're in support of and what we're about and what we're representing. It's a beautiful opportunity to do it, and the words are right there for us. And so, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Singh.
Yes, just a couple of reminders for the week. We have a Library Board of Trustees meeting tomorrow evening, an Arts Commission meeting on Thursday, and I do want just to follow a colleague, but an additional shout out to the East Lansing High School boys basketball team. That it was an exciting time not only for the high school, but I have a second grader who's in the room. We attended the games both on Friday and Saturday, second graders, fifth graders, all across the school district. I think folks were incredibly fired up, including fine alumni like our very own Mayor Brookover, who I saw walking along the road after the final game. And
I think I was on the sidewalk.
Sidewalk, yes. Excuse me. Thank you for the correction, sir. And ultimately,
I don't want my neighbors to think that I was violating pedestrian traffic rules.
Rioting on the streets, heaven forbid. At any rate, I just want to, Ray Mitchell, who's also an East Lansing graduate, the fearless leader and basketball coach at the high school, just want to give him a shout out. And I think it's one additional way through athletics to rally and feel good through our community.
Okay, thank you. City Manager's report.
Just a couple items. First of all, Charter Review Committee meets this Thursday at 6:30 here at Hannah Community Center. And then secondly, I just want to offer up thanks to the East Lansing Police Department and Fire Department for keeping East Lansing safe over the 4-day celebration of St. Patrick's Day. So,
Okay, thank you. City Attorney report?
Nothing this evening, thank you.
Okay. Item 3.1, income tax presentation.
Good evening, Andrea Smith, City Treasurer. So I am here to give you guys a brief update on the income tax. So a little bit of history and then some revenue information from the last few years since we implemented this income tax. You want to go to the first slide? So first, I want to go over just a general history of the income tax. I know a lot of people were here when that happened, but some people weren't. So it was voter approved in August of 2018. It took effect on January 1st of 2019. It will end effectively at this time, December 31st, 2030. Within that approval, there was a 5 mil reduction in our city operating property tax millage. So that went from a 17.5362 mils to 12.5362 mils, which it is still currently at. East Lansing residents pay a 1% tax, non-residents pay a 0.5%. And then there was the provision of the dedicated purposes of the income tax fund, which was 20% of it to go to public safety, 20% for infrastructure, and 60% to our unfunded pension liabilities. Something to note while I go through this presentation is you'll see two representations of years. One is fiscal year, which is from July to June each year. That is our finance year. And then a tax year for the calendar year is a tax year for income tax. So some of our numbers don't perfectly align up because we have to pull reports from income tax that are based off tax year versus what our fiscal year is. Next slide. So this is a updated number of our collected revenue since the beginning of the income tax. So when we started it, we only got a half fiscal year of revenue from January 1st till June 30th. That is why that first year is so low. And it also was when people were first learning how to do this and to file. As you can see, there was a slight drop in fiscal year 21. That was due to the work from home in the COVID years. But after that, we have seen a steady increase since. Fiscal year 23, to note too, is we have done some things with collecting compliance work, something called state tape, which I will get into further into the presentation. But during that year, we did two different tax years to collect, so that's why the revenue was a little bit higher in fiscal year 23. Next slide, please. So next is a representation of the 5 mil reduction to our operating millage, which goes directly to our general fund. So these amounts are what we would have gotten from the property taxes, but were lost due to the reduction. We do pay back our general fund out of income tax these dollars amounts. So as you can see, property tax values have continued to go up, so we see that number increasing each year. Go ahead and next slide. So I know that this has been a topic of discussion, so I want to make sure that this is well represented. So in this slide, it is showing what our resident versus non-resident revenue is. This slide is indication of only those people who have filed returns. So as you may see in the very first slide, there's a total revenue. That revenue includes any business that has withheld for their employees and has sent us their money. That doesn't mean that all of their employees have filed. So therefore, we can't get a direct indication of whether they are a resident or non-resident until they actually file their return. So when you see this, I have a graph on the next page too to demonstrate that the resident revenue is also less that payback to our general fund. So there's quite a discrepancy between what non-residents pay versus residents. So if we go to the next slide. This will show you a graph, which is a little bit easier to see. So in green is our resident amounts, and purple is the non-resident amounts. So currently, non-residents are paying a large portion of this income tax. Okay, we're gonna go forward. So another thing we've been looking at and trying to do better at is compliance. So what I was talking about earlier was state tapes. We have to reach out to the state of Michigan. They will get us what they call a state tape for each tax year that we have had taxes. On those state tapes is information for people who have filed with the state of Michigan but have not filed for the city of East Lansing. So what we do is we send out letters to those people indicating we believe you may need to file. And then we get information back from those people, letting us know whether they truly didn't need to file or if they hadn't. So for tax year 19, we sent out 2,003 letters in fiscal year 23. In fiscal year 24, we sent out letters for tax year 20 and 21. So that was combined almost 5,000 letters. And then for tax year 22, we just started mailing those, and we've mailed out 1,700 letters. Because of this, we are hoping to see more increased compliance going forward. We've also are thankful for you guys for approving an income tax assistant. We actually are in the process of getting ready to interview this week. We've just been waiting for a physical space in City Hall to actually house them. So as soon as we have that, we will have someone starting here, and their main focus will be compliance and customer service. We're also going to work with other municipalities that have an income tax and see if they have any additional ideas of how we can get better compliance for withholding and for people to actually file. Next slide. This is a breakdown of each year from fiscal year 20 to fiscal year 24 of how we have divided out the 2020-60 for the public safety, infrastructure, and pension. As you can see, those numbers have pretty much stayed around the same amount, a little bit higher depending on how much revenue we get. But we're also having to pay back the general fund. As property tax values go up, we have to pay them back a little bit more too. Next slide. So this is actually something that you'll probably see more of when we get to the budget for income tax, but this is based off of what we brought to you for forecasted estimates for the income tax a few weeks ago. It shows kind of a breakdown and a flow chart of how we get to our numbers for our splits and what each group is getting. The income tax revenue, like I said, is just an estimate, and then we have to reimburse our property tax amounts, administrative cost. Then we get what our net amount is to break off for pension, public safety, and infrastructure. We are still defining these numbers more as we go through our budget process, so I think you'll see something more definite when we come to present the income tax budget. Next slide. This is just a breakdown of where our admin costs go to. So we do use innovative software services for our software, and then this kind of explains what those services are they provide for us. So they are entering our tax returns, auditing all of our tax returns, processing all of those returns. They also do a number of other things related to W-2s and W-3s. They do process all the payments that they get. And then we have our general administration through the city, which is our personnel expenses and operating costs just to have someone at City Hall working on this. Next slide. So this is our city pension, which was one of the, 60% of our funds go to this. So the state of Michigan came out with a regulation, which is Public Act 202, that requires us to be 60% funded. Otherwise, they would take some action at the state level. Before we got the income tax, we were at a 49.16% funding level. We have since went up due to the income tax. In fiscal year 22, we did have an assumption change from our pension provider that did reduce our funding percentage. However, we have went up since then. We also got a good increase by getting the state of Michigan pension grant in fiscal year 24, but we do have some more work to go to get this really fully funded. Our goal would be 100%. Current membership in the pension program is we have a total of 819 employees that are in the pension program that will at some point benefit from this. Next slide, please. So this is a quick breakdown of what the Department of Public Works has used their portion of the pension funds, the income tax funds for. So these are some highlighted projects. They do show that they have used other funds, not just income tax for these projects. But if we go to the next slide, this will show you some highlighted streets that the Department of Public Works has been able to work on and fix due to partially the income tax funds. So many of these streets wouldn't have been able to have any kind of work done or would have maybe been postponed if we didn't have those income tax funds available to us. So that is a large portion of town that has had something touched in their area. Next slide. This is a breakdown of where our Parks and Rec funds go. I know it's a little small to see, so I do have another breakdown of individual projects. Once again, this is showing if projects were just funded by income tax or if they had additional funds related to them. Some of these projects needed may have gotten a grant but needed matching funds, so we were able to obtain those with the income tax funds as the matching from the city side. Next slide. And this is just a breakdown of some of the major projects that Parks and Rec have either dedicated money to that they're coming up in the next year or so, or that they've already been able to accomplish. So the Hannah Center got some theater sound and lighting improvements, wheelchair seating areas. We also have the Hannah Center partial roof replacement. The Aquatic Center had a number of updates done to it, repaving of their parking lots. If you go to Bailey Park, there's things for installation of outdoor fitness area. Patriarch Park had the partially the money went towards the tennis and pickleball court reconstruction. Remodeling of the pavilion and the restroom building in there. Softball complex got new dugouts. The soccer complex was able to replace and expand their parking. Next slide. And then there's some other park improvements here. So White Park Trail got an extension, bridge replacement. We have some ADA accessible walkways put in. So there's a number of things that were updated. Stoddard Park has had a huge replacement project with their walkway, benches, water fountain, things like that are going on currently. And then the Dr. Robert L. Green historical marker. So not everything is just focused on improvements. There's also things that are dedicated for objects like this historical marker, which are very important to the town. So design and installation, including a bench and an accessibility ramp. Next slide. And then public safety, most of their money has gone to wages, overtime. The fire department has used a lot of the funding for trainings, continued education, updates to their gear and tech equipment, but most of it is general operating cost. So that is my update on the income tax.
Thank you.
Questions?
Questions? Anything? Dr. Altman?
Yes, I have a couple of questions. So a minor one on slide 10, when I was going through here, this is the one that shows the detailed breakdown of the 60-20-20 split.
Yes.
A little bit before that one.
Yep.
The one after that. So I was trying to figure out how to make amounts match up across different slides.
Yep.
Just because as a reader, I want to make sure that numbers match.
Of course.
I couldn't see that matched up with any of the other fiscal years, and that's because it's the forecast.
Yes, so this
Okay.
is forecasted for fiscal year 26.
So just a minor suggestion, just put that into the slide title.
Yep.
Very minor suggestion. So then the big question I've got is trying to make some numbers match. So slide 9, the one before that one. If you look at fiscal year 23,
Yes.
the splits, when you add them up, you get about $8.6 million, which is sort of pretty standard for most of those amounts and also the amount on slide 10. If you go back 2 slides to the bar graph, and other direction, slide 7, yeah, that one. So there, if you look at tax year 23, and you add those numbers, non-resident plus resident, you get to about 5 million.
Correct.
So the
that-
difference is about 3.6 million.
Yep, so that difference is due to filers. So we have all of the money with withholding, but because we haven't went through the state tape for tax year 23 yet, we haven't got more people to file yet for that year. So that is where part of the difference is from, is we have the revenue as a whole, we just can't split it between residents and non-residents because we don't have people filing yet. So it is a withholding amount of revenue that we have. We just don't have the filings yet to be able to determine which one goes to what bucket.
Can you go back in years to split? So what I'm after is, if we get the 8.6 million that we actually allocate,
Yep.
is there a way to figure out how much of that comes from residents and non-residents in the past? Or is that an impossible task to figure out?
I think it's probably an impossible task. We go out with what revenue we have in the fiscal year. So on the finance side, right, we aren't focused on residents versus non-residents. We are looking at the revenue as a whole. And we are basing our allocation off of the actual revenue we have minus out the things that have to be paid back. In our tax program, that's all focused on what money, but we are getting money for all of those prior years every day. If someone files right now for tax year 19, that's technically this fiscal year's revenue, but we throw it back in our system, it shows up as tax year 19. So any of these dollar amounts could have been taken at any of the fiscal years, but in the tax program, it shows up in the proper tax year of that filed return. So
Okay, so.
that's the difficulty with it.
That's the difficulty. Okay, so that's very helpful to know. So this bar graph is from the filers,
Yes,
because for the filers, you know their address,
correct.
and that way you can determine whether they're residents or not residents.
Yep.
And then the difference between that and the actual allocation, it's about $3.5 million or so.
Yeah,
Is withholding.
correct.
Okay. All right, thank you. I wish there was an easier way to explain this.
Me too.
Okay. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Other questions?
I have some questions.
Ms. Watson?
Thanks.
So who decided, if you could help me remember or help me recall, who decided the percent breakdown for the income taxes, the 60-20-20?
I believe council made that in their, well, the voters, I mean, it was put on the ballot.
All right, and so is that what's going to happen in 2030?
I can't say, I think that would be up to city council.
So city council would have to move forward with what's the option to keep it going after 2030? What
It
are
would
the
have
options?
to go back out to a vote of the citizens.
Okay, and when we voted, it also talked about the percent that the money was gonna go towards? Okay, all right, I get it. Can you tell me percentage-wise, the percent that non-residents or people who work here but don't live here pay next to the people that live here and work elsewhere pay?
That's kind of on that bar graph, but I can try to look at it and get you a percentage-wise of the difference.
Yeah, I was trying to do the math, but it didn't work out when I was quickly trying to do it, so.
I'll get that for you.
That would be great. And did I say that right? It's income tax from people that live here, as well as a contribution of people that work here but don't live here.
Correct.
That pay towards these different things.
Yep.
All right. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Carrie has one.
Mr. Meadows?
If I can just respond to one of your questions. The income tax was on the ballot, I think, in November of one year and did not have these allocations in it. But council had passed at the time a resolution establishing those allocations. It failed at the ballot. And when we put it back on the ballot, we did a survey. You know, we actually hired somebody to do polling to see what people wanted, and it was clear that they wanted it built in, these percentages. They were willing to pay an income tax if they knew what the money was going to go for sure. And that's why those percentages are in there. And I wasn't sure what you were asking before, but non-residents pay 0.5%, and residents pay 1%. So
And I was
that's,
just wondering, like, the circle graph of percentage, what does that break down to? Is it 30% people who work here but don't live here that pay towards these 60-20-20? Or, you know, what percentage is it versus?
and I
yeah.
think they would have to do the
Yeah,
math
yeah.
on that.
Thank you
Yeah.
for getting that back. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Mr. Meadows, you don't want to do the math on that right out of your head?
Not out of my head,
Oh,
no.
okay, I just want to make sure. Any other questions? Yes, I'm sorry, Ms. Singh.
Okay. I just want to confirm that we do have electric filing directly.
We do, and we just found out that we are almost up to 3,000 new people have filed this year online.
Okay.
So it is going well.
Sorry, I'm like a broken record on this
No,
one.
that's
but
totally
I'm
okay, but we are,
really-
and it's going really well.
And is that part of the ISSI contract, or that was, it's
No,
a separate
it's a separate
contractor?
contract, yep.
Okay, thank you. And then the current pension system, you listed the individuals that are participating. Those are retired in, participating, or those that are actually a part of that retirement?
So there are inactive employees who are currently receiving benefits. There are some that are entitled that are not working here but have not reached the age to actually get their retirement. And then we have still 295 active employees who will be receiving a pension when they retire.
Got it, thank you. And then the state tapes,
Yes.
sorry.
No, that's okay.
The state tapes, you get those annually from the the state treasurer's office.
Yep, we have to request them and pay for them, but yes, we are trying to do them every year now.
Okay, and then as just the prior question, we get those, when people are required to file by, what, April 15th?
It's actually April 30th for city.
30th?
Yep.
Okay, and then when is a reasonable amount of time when you request those tapes?
We will usually do it in our not busy time, so the slow time is usually in the fall. So we would request whatever the next tax year is that we don't have at that point. I think there might be a limit of what time the state allows us to request it, but we always try to do it in the fall for us.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else, Council? Yes, sir.
I was one of those 3,000 people who filed using the portal, and it was great. And I want to just say thank you to everybody who implemented that and also made sure that that was on the radar for doing it. You can't actually get your tax prep program to talk directly to it, but that's okay. You can upload the PDFs and it works just fine, and it saved a lot of time and a lot of arts and crafts. So really appreciate that that we have that. I also did want to comment, since it's an opportunity to talk about this a little bit more. The other thing that we had the first time we tried the income tax is we didn't have a time limit on it. And then one of the things that sort of came out in the discussions after that is that people are used to paying millages. They know what they're paying for, and they pay for it for a fixed amount of time. And that's how people are used to funding local governments. And so what we thought was, how can we make the income tax look like a millage, essentially? So we put the time limit on it, and we dedicated the funds. So that was the theory behind why we set it up the way we set it up, just in broad terms by way of background.
Okay, any other questions, comments, concerns? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Bellarmine, consent agenda.
So 4.1, approve a change order with Fishbeck for drain improvement project in an amount not to exceed $70,000 and authorize city manager to sign. 4.2 is approve an addition of a city council special budget work session meeting on April 29th, 2025 with scheduled start of 6 p.m. 4.3 is approve the 2024 downtown parking system reports. 4.4 is approve a conditional Class 3 rental license for an occupancy of up to 2 unrelated persons or a family at 580 Spartan Avenue. The owner of record is Frank and Angelique Cyangi, and the legal agent is Connie Cyangi St. John's. 4.5 is approve a resolution recognizing March 2025 as Women's History Month. 4.6 is set a public hearing for April 8th, 2025 to consider the regulatory status of a sub-2-acre wetland located at 2447 Lake Lansing Road. 4.7 is approve year 5 of a 5-year contract with 100 Acre Woods in the amount of $97,480 to perform soccer field maintenance at the East Lansing Soccer Complex and the East Lansing Hannah Community Center, and authorize the city manager to sign. 4.8 is approve a request from Foster Swift for a waiver of conflict. 4.9, introduce and refer to the Planning Commission proposed ordinance 1546, an amendment to section 50-94 of the zoning ordinance, which would change the process for developers seeking to transfer credits in association with the diverse housing requirement for certain developments in downtown East Lansing. 4.10 is set a public hearing date of April 22nd, 2025 to receive comments on ordinance 1545, an amendment to the definition of family in chapter 50 zoning of the city's code of ordinances.
Do we have a motion?
Approval of the consent agenda.
Dr. Altman moves approval. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Ms. Watson. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Consent agenda passes unanimously. We therefore move on to the business agenda. Item 5.1, consideration of closure of 2 lanes on Albert Avenue between MAC Avenue and Grove Street, beginning no sooner than May 5th, 2025, and ending no later than 5 p.m. on August 11th, 2025, for Albert Al Fresco.
Good evening, Council.
Hi.
My name is Matt Apostle. I'm a Community and Economic Development Specialist here with the City of East Lansing. Now, as the Mayor said tonight, staff brings for your consideration the road closure, site plan, and time period for Albert Al Fresco, which is downtown East Lansing seasonal pedestrian public space along Albert Avenue. So now, as the Council may recall, back in 2024, the site plan for Albert Al Fresco was updated to address concerns from both neighboring residents as well as businesses, as well as to better utilize Ann Street Plaza and spread Albert Al Fresco infrastructure into additional areas of the downtown. It is staff's, as well as the East Lansing Downtown Management Board and the East Lansing Downtown Development Authority's recommendation to continue with the same site plan for Albert Al Fresco in 2025. This is based on staff's experience working downtown in the space, as well as community feedback, which a survey of which summary data is attached to your agenda item report. This feedback shows that Albert Al Fresco was still largely popular among the members of the public who filled it out in 2024. As well as business feedback data that showed that there was a preference towards this site plan from 2024 versus previous year's site plans, as well as foot traffic data. We had a foot traffic analysis done on the Albert Al Fresco space in the fall of 2024 for the 2024 season. But it also gave us historical data that showed daily, weekly, and monthly foot traffic numbers for that area since January 1st, 2017, which allowed us to compare to previous years. Generally speaking, the foot traffic numbers remained very steady year to year when Albert Al Fresco was taking place, which showed that the space was just as well trafficked as it was in years past, despite the site plan change. With this in mind, that would be staff's recommendation. The time period would be similar to last year as well, which would be May 5th, 2025 to August 11th, 2025. Additionally, similarly to last year, we would include the weekly expansion eastbound to Mack Avenue for protecting pedestrians each Thursday night during our Albert Al Fresco game nights. And we would also still do the additional Al Fresco seating in different areas of the downtown to sort of spread out that infrastructure to support all the businesses in the downtown. Staff are happy to answer any questions you may have on this item.
Mr. Bellman, do you recommend this?
I do.
Okay, questions? Any questions? Yes, Dr. Altman.
So I'm looking at some of the survey data in the packet on today's agenda. And so one of the open-ended questions was the layout for this year's Albert Al Fresco has been updated from what it was in prior years. What are your favorite elements of this new layout? What do you wish was the same from the past? And 46.15% of grouped responses indicated that they want the space to be larger or expanded like it was in years past. So these are open-ended responses, but I guess they must have been specific enough that you were able to group them into one category that said, this is what we want.
Yes, I went through each response and categorized it.
That's a lot of data coding.
It was.
Congratulations and thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
And then the other open-ended question was any additional feedback or criticism. And there, 55% of group responses said they wanted Al Fresco to be expanded. What does that mean by expanded here? Does that mean they want it longer in time or more space, or?
Let me go into that data because I believe that there might have been a second question or a second response on that data. I could be wrong, but so there's also 22.5% of group responses that said that they wanted Al Fresco to be left open longer. That's on that same slide right beneath there. So then the 55% would be exclusively people who wanted the plot of Al Fresco or the areas in which Al Fresco was to be more plentiful or larger.
To be bigger.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm a bit puzzled by your interpretation of the data from the business community, because here's what I see. So there was a survey that was given to businesses, right? And the question was, as a business owner / manager, was your experience, and then positive, negative, or neutral, right? And you just counted how many people fell in each bin. So I compared the 2023 data, which was the big footprint, which you helpfully sent me today, with the 2024 data, which was the reduced footprint. And what I see is that positive went from 63% in 2023, which is high, really high, down to 34% in 2024. Okay, so the positive response was cut in half. The negative response went up. So the negative response was 9% in 2023 and 20% in 2024. So the negative response doubled with a smaller footprint. And then the neutral response went up. It was 28% in 2023 and 46% to 2024. So taking those numbers at face value, it kind of looks to me like it's not just the community that likes the larger footprint, it's the business community that likes the larger footprint. So what am I missing?
So that interpretation by staff was based on a question on the following page in that presentation, which says the layout for this year's Albert Alfresco was updated from what it was in previous years. Overall, how do you feel about this updated layout? And 45.16% of respondents felt positively about it, whereas only 25.81% felt negatively, and then 29% felt neutral. So we take that to mean that, generally speaking, this was something that they supported over not supporting. And yeah, you are correct on the positive, negative for the overall experience surrounding Albert Alfresco. A lot moved to neutral in 2024 is what we noticed.
All right, thanks.
Yes, ma'am.
I just want to, on the discussion around what does expanded mean, I just want to offer that as part of the University Student Commission, in prior meetings, they've talked about it would be great to have access to this type of event while they are here. So just wanted to incorporate and share on that front. And then the other piece that comes to mind in terms of, the importance of what this could mean to our businesses downtown is one thing we're extremely fortunate to have in our community is Michigan State University, the student body that is here that frequents many of our businesses. But as many media reports are starting to discuss more often, our recessions, or a recession could be looming, and how do you create more space and more energy? People like to be around others, and creating a space, an event like Alfresco that can help be a drawer, or I guess I can speak tonight, a further draw to our community and downtown area that could be really helpful to our small businesses downtown. So maybe this is not a question, but more connecting some dots that I don't want to be too paranoid about reading tea leaves in terms of where the economy could be heading and how we should be thinking about our small businesses downtown, but the importance of events like this. So just wanted to put those pieces together, at least on the table for thought.
Okay, any other questions, comments, or concerns to be directed to staff?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So I see the porter potty, and that's been there all years, or was it just last year that it started?
We brought that in last year because that was one of the concerns that was raised by the businesses, is that people would come down there but then needed a place to use the restroom, would go into them. So we brought that. We took it away, but then we brought it back this fall because there was still that need for when people are visiting our downtown, whether it's game day or whatever it may be, we don't have a public restroom.
Okay.
And so we brought that back, and that will stay down there through Albert Alfresco again this year.
Okay. And have we ever done wash stations anywhere? Like during the art festival, you could see some vendors that maybe had their own jug. Actually, this was on the craft side. They had their own large jug, and you could pump it and have some water. So have we ever anywhere offered something like that?
Well, a lot of this grew out of COVID, Albert Alfresco and other things. And during those times, we had a setup where it wasn't so much wash stations, it was hand sanitizer. that were on barrels and different things. But we can look into seeing if we can add something like that.
Yeah, I'd be curious the cost and if you could. And truthfully, who I have in mind is unhoused people who are in the community, and it's safe for them to be downtown. And it gets hot, or you might need to rinse off or something. But I am curious, and I'm sure others would benefit too. But
Yeah, I believe inside the porta potty itself, there is a hand sanitizer in that. So, yeah, but we can look into it.
Thanks.
And we have rented hand washing stations from the same company we rent the porta potties from for event-specific things. Like if we have somebody vending food, they're required by the health department to have a hand washing station. So we know them. We at least know those numbers.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, anything else? I therefore move to approve the site plan and closure of 2 lanes on Albert Avenue between MAC Avenue and Grove Street, beginning no sooner than May 5th, 2025, and ending no later than 5 p.m. on August 11th, 2025 for Albert Al Fresco.
I'll second that, but Mr. Mayor, can we include the approval of the site plan within that motion as well?
It says that.
I thought you just indicated the closure of the
I
lanes.
move to approve the site plan and closure of 2 lanes.
Then, I just didn't hear that.
Okay.
But I second that.
Okay.
Would you take a friendly amendment to
I
your
don't know.
motion? Would you consider adding that upon further data collection and community survey results, looking for city staff to come back to us with a recommendation on how to expand both footprint and calendar for Albert Al Fresco in March of next year?
Yeah, no, I don't, no, with respect to you, I don't consider that a friendly amendment. I think that's a separate category of things.
I'll just note that, and I think staff would agree with this, that we talk about that every year. Like at the DMB, that is one of the issues that has been discussed, so it will be discussed again. And I assume we're going to continue to do these surveys. So.
But I think the discussion over the data, the survey collection, we're presented with the same plan as last year. There has been no recommendation provided at this point in time about expanding time and/or footprint.
Not for this year, but we would be looking for that in the future.
Are we?
We look at it every year. So.
As does the DDA. So, guess maybe.
Mayor Pro Tem mentioned a deadline, though, of March. And so does it happen, in that deadline that we get that feedback? Because I would just be in support of asking for that feedback and that information by March so we know it's on everybody's minds and stuff. And I understand that it might not be a friendly amendment, but...
Okay, well, there's a motion on the table, so discussion on the motion. Dr. Altman.
Yeah, I have an amendment to the motion. I move that we replace the site plan and closure of 2 lanes on Albert Avenue as presented in our agenda item report with the pre-2024 Albert Al Fresco road closure site plan, which is the last attachment to the agenda item report.
Okay, is there a second on the amendment to the motion?
What page is that? 64?
Yes.
And so, I'm sorry, I just want to make sure I'm understanding.
Yeah, fine.
So this is you're asking for an amendment to accept the one before we changed it to shorter. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay. Is there
That's a friendly amendment?
No.
Okay, I didn't think it was.
Is there a second to the amendment?
I'll second it.
Okay, moved and seconded. Discussion on the amendment.
If I could address my amendment
Of course.
briefly, please. So I think we've gotten a pretty clear signal from the community, and I think frankly we've gotten a pretty clear signal from the business community that the big footprint was a placemaking success. People really liked it. People don't often tell you what they like about what's going on, but in this case they did. We've got survey data. We got a whole bunch of emails about it last year. I heard about it a lot canvassing, which is what put this on my radar. This is not my issue. I'm following the lead of the community on this. And I think it's easy to see why the bigger footprint is better. It's safer and it's quieter. Okay, it's safer because it gets the cars out of there. Cars aren't able to drive around down Albert and up Grove. And if you've got kids running around, that's better. And it's quieter. Cars are annoying to everybody except the people driving them. And we have a loud car problem. And I'm sure that was a problem in downtown East Lansing. There are jurisdictions all around the country and all around the world that have figured out that if you want to build spaces for people, you got to keep the cars at bay. And in many instances, there are going to be some businesses that will have to adapt, but they adapt and we move on. So I think this is a perfectly reasonable thing to ask for, and the community has told us that they want it. I'm not trying to be dilatory. I made this motion last year, or a version of this motion. I'm making it again this year because last year we were down a council member during that meeting. And so the motion failed 2-2. And so the community didn't really get a chance to see where the council stood on this issue. And so I wanted to bring it back this year because we're at full strength. It's a chance for the council majority to speak on the issue, and it's a chance for the community to see where the council stands on it.
Okay, other discussion?
Yeah, I'd like to respond.
Sure.
That isn't what I've heard, frankly. And I've walked those streets and knocked those doors also. I will say that last year we had the benefit of people who actually appeared at the microphone to talk about the issues that were presented by the larger footprint. And we don't have that this year because we did a survey. Surveys, if they are not scientific in some way, and this is basically whoever wants to answer the survey answers the survey. I think it's useful, don't get me wrong, but I don't think it actually presents what the community might feel about the larger versus a smaller version of Albert al fresco. I think both were very successful, and this was very successful last year as well, and there was plenty of room for people to enjoy Albert al fresco. I don't think it removed any of the games or other things that were available down there, and it didn't seem to reduce any of the number of people that attended and utilized the space. If we are going to go back to a new space, I think we need to do something a lot more than relying on this particular type of survey in order to do it. So I'll be voting no on the amendment.
Other discussion? Go ahead. Oh, I'm going to be voting no again. With all due respect to Dr. Altman, I disagree with his assessment and evaluation of the, quote, data, end quote. Moreover, I've sat through multiple DDA meetings where staff made wonderful presentations, interacted with all the members of the DDA. I think the DDA was very supportive of the change that was made last year and is supportive of it continuing this year. And I suggest that the community, trying to read the community based on this kind of a survey is a perilous task. Again, with all due respect to Dr. Altman, he looks at data and figures out what the data seems to say, and I look at data and I try to figure out what it says too. And the other thing that's just astonishingly startling to me is we talk about placemaking in downtown East Lansing. And number one, I've said this before and I'll say it again, I think at a certain level this particular placemaking is discriminatory against businesses that don't get to share in the foot traffic that comes out of the street, up the curb, and into the restaurants and bars that are immediately contiguous. I have continued to hear complaints. They're usually voiced behind the scenes because they're embarrassed to have to say this stuff publicly. But the reality is I continue to hear complaints from other businesses about how this is effectively discriminating against them because they can't put tables on their sidewalks and they can't have this kind of walk-in traffic and events. But the other thing that's just astonishing to me, astonishing, is that we have Valley Court Park, which is essentially in the middle of downtown and cries out for placemaking. It's an open space. It's unique to this city. And if we're talking about expanding placemaking or doing a different kind of placemaking, I think before we start wonking around with this particular location, we should take a very serious look at using the open spaces that we have. So for all those reasons, I will be voting against the amended motion. Other comments? Ms. Watson?
I liked the slow walk that Mayor Pro Tem proposed, that we get an opportunity, or that council gets an opportunity to discuss and think about and get the planning team's perception on what it might look like if it was expanded or if it was for a longer period of time. I do remember the issues and had spoken to the 7-Eleven owner, and so this goes back to those barriers that happened for the 7-Eleven. And just to refresh for those that might not recall or didn't know, the trucks that have to drop things off, it was more difficult for them to pull into the 7-Eleven and drop those things off because of the shutdowns that were experienced by 7-Eleven. So I will be voting no, but I wonder, just process-wise, I know at first Mayor Pro Tem did say friendly amendment, and you said no, and then Councilmember Altman said, I have an amendment, so can she propose an amendment, is my question next. Process-wise is my question. I think, yeah,
I think the Mayor Pro Tem can do whatever she wants.
Okay.
I think we need to vote on this
Yeah, no
amendment
problem. I
first.
just wanna,
And I just might suggest that her thoughts might actually be not an amendment to the main motion, but a separate motion with instructions to the city manager and staff to investigate the possibility of an expanded site time next year in a timely manner so that we can consider it, I guess, at least at the latest by March. So, all right. Any further discussion on the amendment? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I want to just speak on the amendment before us that I think what the public may be hearing tonight is we all have constituencies and people we talk to frequently. I, for one, speak with a lot of families with young kids who are still missing the larger footprint, and this by no means is a reflection of all the work that staff has put in and engaging with the businesses across the community. So I want to be clear on that. I supported this amendment last year. I plan to, or this motion, to go back to the original footprint. I plan to support it again this year, and we'll go from there with the vote.
Okay, any further discussion? Could we have a roll call on the motion to amend the main motion, please?
Councilmember Altman,
Yes.
Councilmember Meadows,
No.
Councilmember Watson,
I'm sorry, no. I think that's correct. I'm sorry.
This is on the motion to amend, so this would be on Dr. Altman's amendment to expand
Okay.
the site,
Yes, no.
okay?
Mayor Pro Tem Singh,
Yes.
Mayor Brookover.
No. All right, so the motion to amend fails 3-2. Back to the main motion. Any further discussion on the main motion? Yes, ma'am.
I want to make an amendment, or I want to make a motion.
Go ahead.
I move that we, reflecting on community survey data as well as feedback that we've retained throughout the community over the year that we look at expanding both footprint and calendar, not only of the original and site plan before us this evening, both the original and then current site plan before us, that we include Valley Court Park and direct the city manager to work with staff to bring that before us no later than March of 2026.
Okay, we already have a motion on the floor, Mayor Pro Tem. So can we take care of that motion first before we get to your motion? Is that acceptable to you?
Sure.
Okay. So we're at the main motion relative to this specific staff recommendation and Mr. Bellman's recommendation. Any further discussion on the main motion? Okay. Roll call vote on the main motion, please.
Councilmember Altman,
Yes.
Councilmember Meadows,
Yes.
Councilmember Watson,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Singh,
Yes.
Mayor Brookover.
Yes. Now, Mayor Pro Tem, do you have another motion relative to this subject matter?
I'll second the motion that she stated earlier.
Okay.
Thank you.
Discussion on that motion. Okay. Roll call vote on that motion, please.
Actually, Mayor, I have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
Is that motion, just want to make sure the motion is sufficiently clear that everybody has what they need to get from it?
Yes.
Okay.
So we're gonna look at the larger footprint of the downtown,
Yep.
see where maybe we can do some additional expansions like we've done
Yep.
last year and this year, maybe into Valley Court, look at the timeline. And then the other thing, though, from staff's perspective, is that we would want to come back much earlier than March, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of dialogue
Yep.
surrounding this. So our goal would be to bring something back in early January to start the discussion to see what council's, preferences.
March at the latest. March
Yes.
1 at the latest.
Yes.
But that's consistent with the motion anyway. It's just
Yes.
no later than March, right?
Yes.
And thank you for the clarification, Dr. Altman. I appreciate that. Okay, any further discussion on the Mayor Pro Tem's motion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion passes unanimously. Thanks, Council, for the discussion on that. And thank you, staff, for all your work on this. Item 5.2, consideration of the resolution of support of the lane conversion on Hazlitt Road between Hagedorn Road and Park Lake Road. I assuming you've got enough sleep now after working on the budget that you can cogently address us?
I wish that were true, but that'll come next week. So.
Thank you. Proceed, please.
Good evening, Council. Ron Lacoste, Director of Public Works. Before you is we're seeking City Council's approval of a resolution for the reconfiguration of Hazlitt Road between Hagedorn and Park Lake Roads to reduce the travel lanes from 4 to 3 with the addition of bike lanes, a center left turn lane, and 2 improved pedestrian crossings. The reconfiguration was identified in the city's non-motorized transportation plan. As part of the Hazlitt Road reconstruction project, we had our consultant do a traffic study, and their report found that the reconfiguration of Hazlitt Road to 3 lanes would improve safety and decrease crashes related to rear ends and angle crashes. And it would also not lower the level of service of that road. In general, road diets like this reduce vehicle speeds, increase space between vehicles, pedestrians, and cyclists, shorten distances for pedestrians to cross the street, and reduced vehicle conflicts. And there's lots of information attached to the agenda item talking about road diets in general. Transportation Commission on January 27th had a public hearing to hear residents speak to this, and they didn't have anybody attend the meeting. They had 1 letter submitted that was not in support of the change. Again, there's some history provided, which I won't go over. A lot of this was presented as part of the Hagedorn presentation, so you've seen this before, but we thought it was useful to include with this as well. In general, on the feedback for both Coolidge and Hagedorn Road, Coolidge Road, we've received very little feedback, a lot less traffic, obviously. Hagedorn Road has been mixed. While we've gotten some complaints about you have to wait a little bit longer on side streets to enter the roadway, most of the feedback has said, but it has calmed traffic, lowered speeds, and all the other benefits. So I think overall the feedback has been positive, even on Hagedorn Road. That was fairly contentious in the early stages. January 27th, the Transportation Commission unanimously recommended the proposed lane configuration. And the two crossings, there is one cross from right at the entrance to Deer Path. Unfortunately, we can't put an island there because of the driveway configurations, but we are proposing to put the rapid flashing beacons, and then we're looking at a protected crossing down by Merritt Road where the driveways are less plentiful there. The project will be funded using major street funds, and a MDOT cost-sharing agreement will be provided at a later date for the larger road project. And with that, I'll happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Dr. Altman?
So you answered one of my questions, which was why we can't put a refuge island at Deer Path, and the answer is we can't. It sounds like, right?
There's too many driveways, especially on the south side.
Are there marked crosswalks at either of those locations now?
There are two, and I believe there's one in that location. I don't know where the other one is off the top of my head, but I think there's two now.
They're going to be improved now.
What's that?
They're going to be improved now as a function of this project.
They would have we're proposing to put the rapid flashing beacons like we did along Bircham. So the push buttons where the lights would flash. It is not a signal, it's just to highlight to drivers.
Is there an opportunity to put a crosswalk in to the west of Deer Path?
They looked at several locations. In the west, there's just the density of driveways makes it very difficult. There may be a location to put a crosswalk, but certainly not a protected one without impacting driveways.
The reason I ask is that there's a neighborhood to the north that is really kind of cut off from everybody else. And if there's an option to put a crosswalk in, even if it's not protected, well, this relates to the other question I had about what we're doing tonight. Are we approving the project tonight, or are we supporting a resolution in favor of the project? Or are those
The resolution.
Is that the same thing as approving it? Or is it going to come back to us later and we have to approve it then?
I would like you to approve the resolution in support of the 3-lane conversion. We'd like to finish the design so we can get that under construction yet this year.
So we are approving it?
Yes, you're being asked to approve the resolution in support, correct?
Okay. All right. And so within the parameters of what we're designing tonight, or what we're approving tonight, if we decide to approve it, is there room for you to consider adding another sidewalk without it coming back to us?
Another crossing?
Another crossing?
Yes, we will certainly look at that to the west, and if we can add one, we will add one.
All right.
Other questions? Is there any reason you can't put the kind of signage you're talking about in with the current roadway?
The kind of signage?
The flashing lights?
You could do it with a 4-lane configuration,
Okay.
yes.
All right. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
I think this is a little off the map, but Alton Road and, any consideration, just bringing it up since we're so close to what's happening, but any consideration to encourage the drivers to make a Michigan left as opposed to trying to make a left on Alton and run into all that traffic.
You're talking a northbound left onto Saginaw?
Well, I'm not a north-south person. I'm talking about Alton. Some traffic makes a right onto Saginaw, and then some can make a left and head back towards where Rite Aid used to be. And so the left, when it's very busy during school times, for example, or whatever is going on in our community, the left people choose to turn left into 4 lanes. But really, they could make that Michigan left. Are you following me?
Yep, up by Stonegate, I think they have the Michigan left there. That is something that we've been discussing with MDOT, because Saginaw has an MDOT trunk line, so they are looking at that intersection to see if, what improvements can be made there, because that's been a concern that's been voiced before.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, any other questions of staff? Yes, ma'am.
I just want, I know we've gotten prior feedback from community members of the speeding along Trowbridge. So I just want to, I know this light project will assist in that, but I know, I just want to keep that on everyone's radar screen until we have everything up and operating.
Okay, any other comments? Do we have a motion?
I have a motion, Mayor.
Sir.
I move that we approve a resolution of support for a lane conversion on Hazlitt Road between Hagedorn Road and Park Lake Road.
Second.
Okay, discussion on the motion.
Yeah, I want to just comment on this. Because I think with most of these, I think I've been one of the voters on these. But from the very beginning, from the Bircham Road conversion that took place, we had individuals who would appear before us who would predict that there's going to be a disaster as a result of these. And there has not been. There has been a reduction in accidents. There is better driving. Genuinely, there are people who hate it because they want to drive faster than they can through there. Every place that we have done this, it has worked. And as one of our more famous former council members had told me at one time, is that Bill Sharp had voted against the 1996 Bircham Road and came to me later and said, I could not have been wronger about that. That the reduction in speed along Bircham Road was dramatic. It was safer for the neighborhoods. It's just a better way for us to do things. So I'm very glad that we're doing this with this particular motion, but that we'll continue to look at the ability to reduce speeds and prevent more accidents on all of our roadways. So thanks for all the work that you're doing on this.
Other discussion? I'm going to be voting against this motion for the following reasons. First, I think the data set's incomplete. I think this is an extremely odd route because it starts at Saginaw and comes off for about 2 blocks to get to this intersection. So I'm extremely concerned about what I'll call that channeling effect, and I don't think the consultants, I'm sure they know exactly what they're talking about, but I don't see anything indicating that they did anything to sort of ascertain exactly what's going on in that approximately 2-block period when you get off of Saginaw heading towards Hazlitt. I am on that route a lot recently, and that's really an incredibly odd, dangerous thing. And frankly, the traffic comes off of Saginaw at 55 and 60 miles an hour, and then is required to make this abrupt stop down at the corner of Hagedorn. So I don't think we have enough data. Number two, I don't disagree with what anybody said about the 3-lane configurations, but I just don't see this road in the same light. I don't see as much cross traffic other than now to Costco where there's a light. And frankly, I don't see or I don't sense a lot of pedestrian traffic across Hazlitt Road. I think it's occasional. Then just anecdotally, I appreciate what everybody's saying about, this quote traffic calming. But I have an office on Abbott Road, and Abbott Road ostensibly is traffic calmed. Now, this it's a function of our ability to enforce with a police force that's not fully staffed, but the reality is I see absolutely no difference in speed on Abbott Road since it went to 3-lane. I'm just about to the point of buying my own radar gun and pointing it out my office window, which is right on Abbott Road. I sat there this afternoon on the phone for about 35 minutes and just watched people speed back and forth. The 3 lanes didn't make any bit of difference. It actually made it worse for pedestrians that are trying to cross to the library, who I can see on the crosswalk. And so I think this is a different animal, and I think we don't have enough data to make this kind of change. So I'm going to be voting against this motion. I understand that it's going to pass, but I just wanted to put that on the record. Any other comments? Oh, go ahead.
Briefly, forgive me, I was on the wrong agenda item when I made my comment, so
Yeah.
forgive me.
Yeah.
I skipped ahead.
If
I
I
had to rush you, Mayor.
if I had the ability to forgive you, I would, but I don't have that ability. So, okay, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, aye. Motion passes 4-1. Thanks for your presentation and your hard work on this. Okay, we now move to the next item, which is business agenda item 4. Excuse me. 3, consideration of a contract with Rayhorn Electric, Inc. for the Trowbridge Road Gateway Project, signal improvements in an amount of $697,000, and authorize the city manager to sign. Staff, please.
What you have before you is the contract with Rayhorn Electric for the Trowbridge Road signal as part of the Gateway Project. In June of 2024, City Council, or the City of East Lansing, was awarded state funding for the Trowbridge Gateway Project as a result of some of the impacts that the adjacent US 127 project were having on Trowbridge Road and the adjacent neighborhood. In January 21st of 2025, City Council approved a resolution authorizing a contract between MDOT and the city in the amount of $2.4 million in fiscal year 2025 state earmark funds. These funds are to be used for placemaking/visual barrier between the neighborhood and the new highway configuration and Trowbridge Road extension, an egress path, an emergency egress path from the Red Cedar neighborhood, and then the signals on Trowbridge Road. Originally, council approved the work that MDOT was doing for a signal at Trowbridge Road and Woody's/Taco Bell, and then another one at Arbor Drive. Based on some further study, we're delaying the signal at Arbor Drive and moving forward with this signal, which is the one at Trowbridge Road and Taco Bell and Woody's. Along with this work is the reconfiguration of that intersection. So it'll be, you'll be able to turn, if you're coming out of Woody's heading towards campus, you'll be able to make a direct left out of there versus turning right and making the Michigan left. Some sidewalk improvements and then signals on both sides, so you'll actually be able to cross both eastbound and westbound under stop traffic, because right now only westbound stops. So we received 2 bids, and Rayhorn Electric was the low bid, so we are seeking approval of that contract. We're expecting that work to take place late summer to early fall, based on just the timing of getting signal equipment. There's quite a lead time on that, so we'll nail that down with the contractor as they get their supply chain worked out, but that's what we're expecting at this point. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Bellman, do you recommend this?
I do.
Okay. Questions for staff? Do we have a motion? Oh, go ahead.
So is this in alignment with what's been discussed, or is this a change with what's been discussed regarding the lighting and lights, et cetera, on Trowbridge Road?
The only change from the original approval was we're putting in this signal. The signal at Arbor Drive did not meet the warrants necessary to put a signal in. So we were putting this signal in first. It does include a loop, if you will, at Arbor Drive. So as residents pull up to there, it will trigger this signal. So this will effectively stop everybody coming down Trowbridge at them as they're trying to exit the neighborhood, which was their main concern. The only people that will be able to come out while that signal is triggered is the right turns out of the Woody's driveway, and they'll have to stop first and then come out.
And so the times that we've discussed this was on the table, and the people who have been part of the discussion and concerns, this is in alignment with that, what you're saying?
Yes, we've
I
discussed,
see, I see you, Mr. Bell.
we've discussed our approach with the neighborhood, with the signals.
Mr. Bellman?
So if you recall, City Council, as part of the approval of the work MDOT did within the city's right-of-way, required 2 traffic signals be installed as part of that permit. As Mr. Lacoste is trying to say to you tonight, is we're putting this one in first, seeing how that works.
Okay.
And if it works and satisfies the residents, ooh, I can't speak either. Thank you, you're rubbing off on me. We'd be back to City Council to ask them to reconsider that requirement of 2.
Exactly.
Okay.
And if it doesn't work, we'll be looking at putting in the second one to satisfy the direction.
Thanks.
Other questions?
Yeah.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
What does a 15% contingency mean? Does that go to them, go to us?
It only is spent if their bid is $606,000. The 15% is for anything unforeseen. If they, auger their poles for their signals and there's utilities in the way that have to get relocated, so it's only paid if we run into problems that weren't foreseen when the plans were developed.
And then if we say yes to a 15% contingency and then it doesn't happen, that they needed that 15%, then what happened? Like, I'm reshaping it, but just making sure, like.
Yep, then it doesn't get spent and it goes
and it
towards
just goes back.
other projects. The same with if they may not need $606,000 to finish it. These are based on unit prices, and quantities always vary on contracts. So they may not even need the $606,000. That just doesn't get spent, goes back into the pot of earmarked funds that get used on either the placemaking wall or the egress path.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? Do we have a motion?
I move approval of a contract with Rawhorn Electric, Inc. for the Trowbridge Road Gateway Project signal improvements in an amount not to exceed $697,000 and authorize the city manager to sign.
Do we have a second? Okay, moved and seconded. Discussion on the motion. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Ron. Item 5.4, consideration of a special use request from 213 Ann Street, Inc., owner St. Ann LLC, for approval to modify the interior spaces at 213 Ann Street for expansion of the Fieldhouse Sports Bar into adjacent Suite B with alcohol service and conversion of vacant Suite C to be used as a pizza shop without alcohol service in the existing building. Property zone B3 City Center Commercial District. Sir, do you want to bring us up to date and tell us what you want us to do tonight, please?
Thank you, Mayor. Landon Bartley, your principal planner. As you know, the applicant's representative tonight asked for this to be deferred to the regular council meeting on April 22nd. This has been before the Planning Commission in November, and then in December again, at which time the Planning Commission recommended approval by council. The council then deferred action on the special use permit until at its March 4th meeting until March 18th. And again, the applicant's seeking to defer action on this item. We've had some various iterations of the plan that have come before staff since the Planning Commission's public hearing and since the City Council's public hearing as well. And we wanted to give the applicant a chance to essentially nail down those numbers as far as numbers of seats. There's been a question about a room in Suite A, when that was approved. They started to look at some changes to Suite A, which is the existing field house. And so based on those changes, we agree with the applicant that we think it would be appropriate to delay an action on this item until
Okay, I thought
April 22nd.
I thought I'd heard something about you wanting to staff wanting to send this back to the Planning Commission.
Yes, we think that it would be appropriate because the plans have changed slightly since the Planning Commission saw it in November, that the Planning Commission could see the updated plans before it comes to council. We do not need a public hearing for this, so we could get it onto the Planning Commission's agenda as soon as next week,
Okay,
and the DDA following that.
Planning Commission could or should see. they should see these revised plans because they're not consistent with the proposal in front of us?
We believe that the Planning Commission will probably have a similar opinion as they did in November, but as the plans have changed, we think it would be appropriate to send it back.
Okay, questions? Dr. Ullman?
Yeah, I guess I have so I'm pretty confused about what's going on with this particular site plan and have from the beginning, because what got me initially was that the orientation, the compass on the sheets was off. And if the compass on the sheets is off, then who knows what other errors are in there. That was my thought at the time. So I think there's something going on here that I don't understand. But in particular, I would appreciate some more consideration of one of the special use permit criteria on page 7 of the packet. It's the one that talks about an undue concentration of similar uses in the neighborhood. And I'd like both staff and the Planning Commission to look at this a little bit closer, because I don't understand the staff comment that's in here now. And then I'll read the provision. The establishment, this is one of the criteria for an SUP for a bar in the downtown. The establishment shall not cause or continue an undue concentration of similar uses in the neighborhood, such that liquor establishments and trade become a dominant influence or feature of the district or neighborhood. I don't know how we don't have an undue concentration of seats in bars in the downtown if we've got 4,000 seats in bars in the downtown. The staff comment here is the expansion of the restaurant would return the restaurant to its original size, which has been serving alcohol, not increasing the concentration of licensed establishments in the area. As far as I understand, if we do approximately what the applicant is asking, we're adding a bunch of seats in a space that serves alcohol. And so I read that to cause or continue an undue concentration. And if there's a different interpretation of that, that either staff or the Planning Commission has, and I would appreciate hearing that in a little bit more detail, because right now the staff comment doesn't make sense to me, but I could well be missing something. I have been known to miss stuff before.
Mr. City Attorney, I'm trying to sort of analyze this. Would it be appropriate, given where we are in this process, from motion tonight to table it pending referral back to the Planning Commission and further advice from the Planning Commission, so that it's a table without date?
Yeah, I think that that does make sense. I've been working with planning and looking at the different versions of the floor plan, including suite A, B, and C. There's a lot of discrepancy, and so to the extent that Planning Commission cannot complete their review by the date certain, I think your recommended motion would be appropriate.
Go ahead, Dr.
Point of order, I was just going to recommend that we just do a straight motion to refer to the Planning Commission.
Yeah, the only thing I'm concerned about that is the process we're already halfway into, and that's why I wanted the city attorney's advice. Is Dr. Altman's motion also in order, given where we are in the process? To just simply refer it?
I think either would be appropriate.
Okay, all right. Is that your motion?
Yeah, I'll make that motion.
Hang on a motion. I've got a question. So I've got a couple of questions, actually, because in going through this, if we do send this back to the Planning Commission, then I've got some things I'd like to take a look at. This came to us with a recommendation of, I think there were 8 conditions plus the former conditions that were in existence, and I guess still are in existence regarding the field house. But at this point in time, we're pretty much back to the drawing board, I would say. The first 4 conditions in the new recommendation are not conditions. They're simply, the proposed development does meet all applicable ordinance requirements. That's not a condition. That's an actual requirement of our ordinances. It is not. I don't think it's appropriate to have it as a condition under those circumstances. Number 5 is a replication of condition number 8 under the original conditions, which we're incorporating by reference. Number 6 is the same as one of the original conditions. The only new condition is the incorporation of the original 27 conditions, which, because of a change in ordinances and a change in other aspects of the downtown, seem to me to be no longer applicable for the purpose of this specific request. So most of those conditions relate to the construction of apartments on this particular location, and they don't have anything to do with what is being proposed at this point in time. So when it goes back to the Planning Commission, I think you need to look at all of these conditions and provide us with a new set of conditions. I note that we talk about in these conditions, these original conditions, the use of public airspace for the construction of that apartment. And my question to the city attorney is, do we have a lease that has been executed for the use of that airspace, which we have required for other uses of the air above city-owned property? And then we have a requirement that presumably, because they're requesting that we go to 330 persons, that the original condition is that there has to be an approval by the Director of Code Enforcement and the Fire Marshal, and I did not see that in the packet. Maybe it has happened, but I didn't see it there. We have the permission for persons under 21 years of age to stay on the property until 11 p.m. I think you need to relook at that. There is a reference in number 19 to ordinances that no longer provide the same information that are referred to in these original provisions. So there's a reference in 19 to section 50-8. That's a definitional section today. Back when this was originally proposed, it probably referred to something else. And when you take a look at that, and then the following one, which refers to 50-94 as being a controlling provision of our ordinances in relation to the operation of the field house, that now refers to marijuana sales. So it is no longer applicable to the circumstances here. And the outdoor service area is vacated by midnight. When this was approved, we did not have the apartment complexes that are in the downtown who have complained regularly about the noise from this location later in the evening. So I think the Planning Commission and we should look at those more critically at this point in time before these conditions are proposed to us. So all of those things were recommended to us by the DDA and the Planning Commission. I think without the critical analysis that is necessary for these conditions to be appropriate at this point in time. So if we do send this back, I'm asking that you make sure that everything is looked at in that manner.
Dr. Altman, do you have a motion?
Yeah, so I move to refer this item to the Planning Commission for further consideration, given recent changes to the application materials and questions from the City Council.
Second. Any further discussion on the motion? All those?
The planner
I'd be happy to respond to any of the questions that have been asked tonight. But
Yeah, we got a motion on the floor. So any further questions for staff?
My only question is, any concerns about the motion?
No.
Okay, Ms. Watson?
Yeah, I just want to be clear. What's changed is, instead of it coming back to council by a specific period of time, that it's going to go back to Planning Commission and then come back to council possibly at some period of time. Am I hearing that right? The change is, the applicant mentioned April and you had mentioned April, but the change is it might not be April.
Correct.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Any further discussion? Roll call vote on this one, please.
Councilmember Altman?
Yes.
Councilmember Meadows?
Yes.
Councilmember Watson?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Singh?
Yes.
Mayor Brookover?
Yes. Thank you, staff. Okay, thank you, Mr. Meadows, for your analysis. Item 5.4, consideration of a special, I'm sorry, I'm behind. Won't be the first time in my life. Item 5.5, consideration of request from Arnulfo Ramirez of Los Tres Amigos, Brookfield LLC for a special use permit located at 1351 East Grand River Avenue. The applicant requests alteration of the interior spaces for 2 new restaurants, the Morning Post and Denolfo's, with alcohol service in the existing building and a modified patio. The property is zoned B2 Retail Sales Business District. This is back to us after a public hearing. Staff.
That's correct, Mayor. Thank you. As you know, the public hearing for this request by the council was on March 4th, and there were no public comments in support or in opposition. This is a request to add alcohol service to 2 new restaurants, including a patio out in the front. I think this has been discussed at some length at previous meetings. I'd love to answer questions if there are any, or I can also give a brief presentation if you prefer.
I think we have the sufficient information. Questions from council? Do we have a motion?
A motion.
Go ahead, Dr. Ullman, please.
I move approval of a request from Arnulfo Ramirez of Los Tres Amigos, Brookfield LLC, for a special use permit located at 1351 East Grand River Avenue, as indicated in our packet and subject to the land and the conditions are on pages.
The sample motion begins on page 9 of 10 of the staff report, which is page 10 of
Got
your
it.
PDF.
Subject to the 5 conditions identified on pages 9 and 10 of the staff report, which then also incorporate the 15 conditions from an earlier SUP. That's condition number 5.
Second. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion passes unanimously. Item 5.6, consideration of a contract with Leading Edge Electrical Technologies for $263,500 to replace HVAC equipment serving the City Hall jail area, a project contingency of $26,300, related budget amendments, and authorize the city manager to sign. Mr. Bellman.
So I request council refer this back to staff for 2 reasons. 1, we're doing the assessment at City Hall, and 2, because of the budgetary financial constraints, may look at, if this moves forward, pairing this with other improvements to city facilities and recommending a bond issue to pay for it.
I move we refer this back to staff, given the city manager's recommendation tonight. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from the Mayor Pro Tem. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion passes unanimously. I think, unless I've miscounted for the 43rd time, I think we're at the end of our agenda. Do we have a motion to adjourn? Moved by Ms. Watson, seconded by Dr. Altman, that we adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion passes unanimously. Thank you, City Council, for your attendance, and thank you, staff, for hanging with us.